always a pleasure to talk to Mr. Jaydeva Rande. He knows so much about China. He's our go-to person on China in New Delhi. So Mr. Rande, without much ado, I want to start straight off by asking you this. You know, there's that famous quote by Vladimir Lenin, the other Vladimir, when he said that there are decades when nothing happens, and then there are weeks when decades happen. So we are clearly in that second phase now, where in the last couple of weeks, it feels like we've already crossed 2 or 3 decades worth of geopolitics. Make sense of us what's going on right now with this tariff war. Is it just a tariff war between the United States and China, or is this the established power, which is the United States, seeing China as a direct economic challenger, challenging its global hegemony, which had been there for almost 80 years. The USSR was never a direct economic challenger to the United States. Is this a case of Trump finally realizing that China is the #1 threat to the United States, just like what George Fernandez said to us about 25 years back? What's the real game here between the US and China?
I think, Sandeep, you've hit the nail on the head. If I pedal back to Trump 1, first term, that is when the clash really started. He's the one who interpreted Xi Jinping's declaration that he will achieve the rejuvenation of the great Chinese nation, which translated means recover the territories that China feels it lost through the imposition of unequal treaties. What an unequal treaty means we can discuss later, maybe over coffee, but that's what he said, which means territories that today are incorporated in other countries, he's going to take them back if he feels that they're Chinese. He also said that he wants to bring China to the level of the world's most advanced technology countries. And the third was when he said that he wants to make China a major power with global pioneering influence, something I referred to slightly earlier, which was a direct challenge to the United States. Trump interpreted that as a challenge to the US. And if you recall, within a few months, the party congress at that time finished in November. February, he imposed the technology sanctions on China and demolished China's 2 leading technology champions, Huawei and ZTE. They're virtually bankrupt. They're nowhere near what they used to be. That was what he did. Subsequently, regimes changed in the United States, and there was bipartisan consensus that the Chinese are the challenge to the United States. Not only the challenge, they're challenging the US in the economic sphere, in the scientific sphere, and in the military sphere. And we will be, of course, covering this later. But today in science and technology, which is really what is going to drive the world ahead in the years to come, China has poured billions of dollars into it. They're training hundreds and thousands of people in STEM, and they're developing their military. They've got the largest navy in the world today. They are working on the 6th generation fighters, and the United States is getting worried at the quantities that are being churned out. So it's a threat on multiple fronts, and I think there's a bipartisan consensus that China challenge has to be met. So to come directly to your question, what Trump is doing, I think it's a bit of arrogance of power, as you said, established power, and also a misunderstanding of the Chinese determination to go where they are. So he's unleashed this tariff war. What we are going to see, I think, within a month, as the stockpiled consumer goods, etc., begin to run out, say that's another 30 odd days, the prices of these commodities in the United States is going to rise, and inflation is going to rise too. The Chinese have hit back in terms of US dollar terms. The American tariffs have hit about $500 billion worth of Chinese goods. Chinese tariffs have hit about $160 billion of US goods, but those $160 billion are crucial commodities. They are the ones that hit Trump's base directly, and affect rare earths and materials which the US needs for virtually everything, from hair dryers to missiles to guidance systems, etc. China has just stopped their exports to the United States. So we are going to see the US also approaching a critical time where they will have to start very rapidly building up a refining capacity and extraction capacity of rare earths. So let us see. I think this is round one. We'll have to see where it goes. But I think, in my own view, I don't see this ending very soon.
You also mentioned a little while earlier that you don't believe that Xi Jinping is going to blink first. Is it because what? Is it loss of face, or what's the reason you believe he's not going to blink?
Xi Jinping has this, I would say, dream or ambition that he has been entrusted by the forebears with this task of seeing to it that China comes back to its old glory. Not only him, the children of the communist revolutionaries who have inherited China as it is, the People's Republic of China, all of them go to special schools, and there this is instilled in them. So they all share the same thing. And Xi Jinping is the same. He actually believes in
The
it.
princelings, as they call
The
it.
princelings. And I think he is not going to blink because he feels that this is China's destiny. He's a child of destiny. He also feels that if he blinks, then the momentum that China has picked up will be hit severely. So I think he's not going to back off. And here, if I may just say something which many people missed, I think it was in 1920 or 21, a vice minister of the International Department, which is a secretive arm of the Chinese Communist Party, he wrote a piece, article. I thought it was something to do with political education and ideology as I began reading it. Suddenly realized that what he had done was he had spelt out the areas where China thought the West is going to hit it. And after COVID, they had assessed that the West had become anti-China in its outlook. They're going to start shutting their markets to China. And so they had started preparing. So when I say Xi Jinping is not going to blink, it's also based on this, that Chinese preparations had started as far back as 2020. And just to give you an idea how grim their outlook was, they also anticipated that the West is going to stop exports of food grains, etc., to China. And, the biggest suppliers are the United States, Canada, and Australia of grains, soybeans, etc. So they had started trying to ramp up agriculture production also. So they had a very grim outlook of what the West is going to do and started building up preparedness. And I think that's one of the reasons for Xi Jinping's confidence.
Listening to you, Mr. Ranade, I was just thinking about that saying that they say that history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. My thoughts were going back to 1941. If you remember, when the Empire of Japan had occupied what is present-day Vietnam, Indochina, the Americans froze all their assets and they imposed an economic blockade. And that led to Pearl Harbor, right? The Imperial Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. They wanted to take the Americans by surprise. Do you see this actually playing out now in 2025? Could Taiwan be that Pearl Harbor thing that would trigger conflict between China and the United States?
To respond to your question, which is actually a very complex question, if I may say, but I'll have to touch on 2 points here. One is, of course, Taiwan. And I think Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party have made Taiwan into an issue, an emotive issue for the entire Chinese people, that they have to recover Taiwan. I use the word recover. That's their term. As it's part of the rejuvenation of the great Chinese nation. And what is preventing them from making any move is their lack of surety of what Washington's response will be. And Washington, of course, has maintained some amount of strategic ambiguity here. So they're not sure whether the US will get engaged or not. I think that's one of the reasons why they're holding back. But you would have noticed the intensified Chinese military activity around Taiwan, which is virtually like a blockade if they want to. So signaling is clear. The second, which is why I said it's a complex question, if the tariffs begin to hurt China much more than the Chinese have calculated, or the Chinese Communist Party much more than they have calculated, and there are ways in which the US can do it, then the question comes whether Xi Jinping will have his back to the wall and then lash out, which is what happened with Japan. Right. And in that case, would he undertake a military venture? Taiwan is a possibility. We are the second. It could happen with us. Will he decide that if I'm going down, we'll all go down together? Or will that be another kind of challenge to the US, saying, okay, now you intervene, let us see. So we'll have to see what, because Trump has said he doesn't want to get involved in a clash, and yet if Taiwan has to come, it will have to lead to a showdown. So I don't know where it's going to go, but I think, as far as Xi Jinping is concerned, he's a very tough character. His background indicates he's very tough. He's been through 3 purges. His father has been purged. He has been purged. He's seen his elder sister being killed before his eyes, his mother humiliated. Yet he joins the Communist Party. It's a different kind of guy,
Different kind of guy indeed. But, makes sense for us and the audience about these maneuvers that are on currently, even as we speak, around Taiwan, this virtual blockade that the Chinese have imposed. There are all manner of live fire drills, there are unprecedented warship movements, ADZ violations and all of that. Is this meant to disguise the actual Chinese invasion? That, we kind of get used to this as being the new normal. Acha, there are some more exercises, some more mobilization, and then before you know it, the actual invasion is unleashed. Could that be the game plan for Xi here in Taiwan?
It could be, provided the PLA is willing to play ball. I think the PLA is also slightly hesitant for the same reason. What will the US do? I think that is the big question in front of them. But they're prepared. They've built the landing craft. They've got aircraft which circle Taiwan. In fact, a couple of times they've overflown Taiwan. They've got ships going all around. So it's like they can, they're feigning an invasion. They can always pull one off under the... It is the consequences that I think deter them more. Will there be sanctions? What will happen if they do pull off that? I'm sure the US will react in some form. Will it now be able to get the Europeans and others to go with it? Right. Or has Trump damaged the partnership with with Europe, etc.? These are the questions that will come up. And this is what the Chinese must be assessing right now.
There's this other expression that's doing the rounds in the last couple of months, especially since Donald Trump took over, is this reverse Nixon, which Trump seems to have embarked upon, and reverse Nixon being what President Nixon did in 1972, which is to try and pull the Chinese. He succeeded in getting Nixon and Kissinger pulled the Red China out of the embrace of the USSR. I mean, of course, it was out for a couple of years, but they just took advantage of the situation. Do you see Trump focusing on that and the fact that he wants to get Putin out of Xi Jinping's embrace? Has there been much progress on that lately? He seems to have given up on that.
I think Trump tried that in the first term also. Right. It didn't succeed. He's tried that now. But I think what I personally see is that Putin is not going to back off unless he achieves his, what he wants to do. So it's quite possible that Putin and Trump may strike a deal like Benjamin Netanyahu has with Trump, saying that you give me time, let me achieve, this little bit, and then I can...
In Ukraine.
Right. And then I'm willing to...
Let me keep 20% of Ukraine and we'll see about that.
But whether that means that the partnership between China and Russia will weaken, that I don't know. Because at the moment, both of them are hanging together. Right. They feel that together they can challenge the US much better and more easily.
The no limits partnership.
The no limits partnership. But Xi Jinping is nervous. If you noticed, every time there is a contact between the United States and Russia and Putin, there is immediately either the Foreign Minister Wang Yi or Xi Jinping will ring up Putin and have a contact with them. And both of them make a statement saying that we have kept each other briefed of what the US has said. Right. So there is that nervousness, but I don't think it's going to happen in a hurry. I think Putin is also a hard bargainer, and he thinks he's also got some cards.
It's fascinating how all of these global conflicts and these moves are all interlinked in some sense or the other. Yeah. Whether it's Russia, Ukraine, Taiwan, China, and of course, this point that you made earlier about the rejuvenation of the Chinese nation, could that be achieved without shedding the blood of Chinese in Taiwan? Which, the invasion scenario that you painted invariably is going to lead to the loss of tens of thousands of Taiwanese lives. Can the Chinese absorb those kind of casualties? Because they haven't fought a war of this kind in a long time, at least half a century. 79 with Vietnam. Can they absorb these kind of casualties, and can Xi use that as a thing for his great rejuvenation of the Chinese people? Because he's killing Chinese people in Taiwan, right?
The rejuvenation of the great Chinese nation is not only Taiwan. It is also Ladakh, Arunachal, bits of Himachal, Uttarakhand. So there he will have to shed blood. I don't see us giving up those without a fight. Vietnam also he'll have to shed blood there. With Taiwan, what they seem to have decided, from what I discern, is they have intensified United Front activity, which is hollowing out Taiwan from within, penetrating inside, suborning their journalists, their bureaucrats, their politicians. Mind you, there is a delegation a week going from Taiwan to China, from the KMT. Yeah. So they're trying that and trying to capture Taiwan from within, rather than a military assault. Right. Whether that works or not, I don't know. But the rejuvenation, as I said, involves many other things. It also involves recovery of Senkaku. It involves recovery of the Philippine islands
and some Russian territories as well.
Russian territories as well. And there is a very interesting article that actually people should read. It's called The 6 Wars that China must fight in the next 50 years. They've listed out the 6 wars and the years when they intend to fight it. So at one time, their thinking is that we will have to shed blood. But here I will point to Galwan. Yes. And I think, coming to your question, their capacity to tolerate loss of life or see Chinese blood spilt, I think is quite limited because of the one-child policy. Yeah. So a lot of the parents, they have only one son. They don't want to see that son go. And because of the wealth that China has generated. It's a wealthy nation now, at least in the urban centers. And the children prefer to make money rather than go and join the forces.
I'm going to ask you about that question in a while, but back to India now, from Russia, Ukraine, Taiwan. We've never faced a superpower at our doorstep, ever possibly in all of our existence. When the British Empire ruled India, they ensured that the Russian Empire never touched our boundaries. They created Afghanistan as the buffer zone. Tibet was another buffer zone to ensure the Chinese never touched our borders. But today, we allowed those buffers to go, at least on the Chinese side, and we have a superpower at our doorstep with all the attributes that you mentioned. It's going to be an economic superpower, a technological superpower, and a military superpower, all three. And we're looking at this challenge on our borders for the first time. How are we to respond to this? This is a situation that we've never been faced with before. I think we've been very comfortable fighting Pakistan, which was the lesser threat. The bigger threat was always there in our backyard, 62, of course. But I think in the last couple of decades, we allowed that to recede in the backdrop till we got that wake-up call 5 years back. How do you handle China now that they've presented themselves as a threat?
Well, as you rightly said, we missed many decades. When we should have been preparing for China, we didn't. But now I think my personal view is that we cannot hope to match China within the next few years in any of these terms. It requires a lot of investment, capital, etc. But we will have to look at asymmetric means by which to deter China. And I think that is possible. One we have already achieved, and which is the Agni 5, by which we can target Beijing
Strategic
itself,
deterrence.
strategic deterrence. We have to try and look at other methods, which there are, I'm sure they're already working on it, trying to do two things. One, develop asymmetric capability to see that the Chinese cannot strike us at their will and with impunity, that they will also suffer losses. And the second is to puncture the myth that the Chinese have built, that they're invincible. So even a slight setback to the Chinese, preferably a bloody setback to the Chinese, will puncture this myth that they have built throughout Asia. And that will be a huge blow to the Chinese. Chinese, as you know, are experts at creating narratives and building narratives. And so that is the kind of thing that we will need to do. I'm not talking about your field, which is publicity, or I'm not saying propaganda, but you know what I
Narrative
mean.
warfare.
Yeah. That is something that, again, we'll need to up our game. We are not there. But at least short of that, there are many other areas where we need to do it. But the focus will have to be asymmetric. And I think we need to be a bit more self-confident and a bit more assertive in our partnerships with strong countries with the objective of deterring the Chinese.
Right. So this point that you made earlier also about the one-child policy, which could actually lead to some kind of domestic pressure within China. I've heard that before, but is there any study to suggest that Chinese parents have some agency within China to tell the party, you can't send our children here or there or something like that? I mean, what's to, how do they know, for instance, where their children are going to be deployed? When a war is declared or an emergency is declared, how can they tell where these soldiers are going to be sent? I mean, it's after all, it's a dictatorial government. It is a communist dictatorship. So how can they pressure the government when you're looking at this one-child policy thing? How does that work? Has it ever happened in the past within China? Give us a few anecdotes about this.
They can't pressure the Chinese Communist Party to a very large extent. Right. But the Chinese Communist Party is sensitive and has become more sensitive over the years to public opinion. Right. And there are two reasons. One is the extent of ideological commitment to Chinese communism has, I think, begun wavering, which it didn't earlier under Mao's time. The second is that when the people agitate or protest, with social media having gained so much prominence, the news circulates throughout China very quickly, and the Chinese Communist Party doesn't like that. So that's one form of pressure. The second, what we are seeing is on the borders with us. The Chinese are finding it difficult to recruit people for the PLA for deployment in Tibet. So they've raised, for example, the salaries of troops deployed in Tibet at least 3 times in the last 3 years. They've heightened. That's one way of luring them in. But people are still unwilling to go. So what they've done is, they have expanded the recruitment pool to the Tibetans, whom they don't trust. So they're keeping them in the logistics area. But to the Mongols, to the Uyghurs, they're trying to get them in here. And to the Huis from the south, from Yunnan, they're trying to recruit them and deploy them in Tibet. So to that extent, they're sensitive to how these Chinese react. And when you say Chinese, by and large, in the Chinese mind, they're talking about the Huns. The others are expendable as far as they're concerned, the periphery. So they are sensitive to them to that extent. The second thing that I would say, just to your point, if there is an emergency and if there is a conflict, then of course every Chinese is expected to come in. But again, here I don't know how many of the Han-Chinese who are in the coastal regions or in the urban centers who are well off, how many of them will actually send their kids? Right. They have one child. Yeah. and they prefer to send them abroad to study, often to stay there and make money, etc. So will they really send them is an open question.
Right, right. So we'll have to bank on capitalism saving us from communism. But, give us a sense, Mr. Ranade, because you study Chinese social media so closely. What is the debate among the people, for instance, when they're talking about Taiwan, when they're talking about these issues that you mentioned about, recovering the lost Chinese territories? Is that a very big emotive issue over there? What are the people talking about really? Is the recovery of all these territories really core to the Chinese people today?
It has become. The Chinese Communist Party's propaganda machinery is very insidious and very effective. And they have been propagating this for a long, long time, that this was our territory, this has belonged to us since so-and-so time, etc. And they manufacture facts. After Xi Jinping took over in 2012, he has put this kind of narrative building front and center of his policy. And therefore, nationalism has become a big thing in China. And when you mention Taiwan, when you mention Arunachal, people sort of feel, it's ours, it has to come back. They, of course, refer to Arunachal as southern Tibet. It's a very emotive issue. And on that, you're not going to get a differing opinion. So he has been able to build that up. But that has two sides. I mean, it can work either way. If they don't get it, then what happens? Right. If they suffer a setback, then what happens? There'll be disenchantment pretty quickly on that. And if I may just, in light-hearted vein, say that they're not the only ones who can claim Tibet, so can we. Lord Shiva's postal address is Mount Kailash, after all.
Of course. But, earlier you also mentioned the fact that if they don't get Taiwan, there could be a rebound, and they could say that, maybe Taiwan can wait. There could be a huge opposition from the United States. Let's go for the other territories that we have, for instance, in Arunachal and Ladakh. Is there a distinct possibility? It was being discussed some years back that this could present quick wins for the Chinese. But now, given our forced posture, the fact that we seem to have woken up in the last 5 years, we have, deployed aggressively, we've built a lot of defenses there. Do you see the Chinese as having second thoughts about moving into Ladakh and Arunachal, particularly after what happened in Galwan?
Firstly, I don't think they've developed second thoughts yet. Their capacity to really comprehend what happened, I think, is a bit slow, despite what some people say. They're not infallible. But certainly, they're going to have a very tough battle if they try anything here, in Arunachal or anywhere on the borders. I think we are now determined to, give them a very good fight. So it's not going to be quick. It's not going to be a decisive battle, which is what their thinking is. But Arunachal is something they've been talking about for a long time. And there are two sets of arguments that are advanced in the Chinese media and in the Chinese social media. One, that Arunachal is, the climate is very temperate. It has a lot of water. Hydropower is surplus. And it's very sparsely populated. So, as the Chinese, this is the right place for us to go. And they blame Mao for having pulled back in 62. That's one argument.
This is Lebensraum, literally.
Yeah. The second is the reincarnation of the 14th Dalai Lama, which will happen sometime, since he's assumed a mortal form, as they say. So at that time, the Chinese are making clear that they are going to want reincarnation or a Dalai Lama on their terms, which is that they will do the selection, they will do the search for the reincarnation, etc. The Dalai Lama, of course, has a different thing. So we might see a situation of two Dalai Lamas, which they don't want. And that is the time I expect there'll be a lot of pressure on us from the Chinese. Whether that translates into military pressure or not, I don't know. But there will be a lot of pressure.
This is going to happen in the not so distant future, given how the Dalai Lama's advancing years. I mean, of course, we wish him a very long life, but given the fact that he is in mortal form, there is, at some point, there will be this issue that will present itself. And do you believe that we have war-gamed this situation adequately?
Well, there are a lot of variables here, but certainly we are watching it very carefully. And when this thing happens, it's not just a question of uh, the 14th Dalai Lama being reincarnated as the 15th. For us, it means who all will accept the 15th Dalai Lama. Tibetan community, yes. Tibetan diaspora will probably go the way the Dalai Lama wants them to go. Tibetans inside China, we don't know. There are 7 million of them there. But what is of direct concern to us will be the Indo-Himalayan border belt, which I call the vulnerable Indo-Himalayan border belt. Because there are, most of them are Buddhists, Tibetan Buddhists in that border region. Their, shall I say, the Guru or the Rinpoche, who's really, or the head Lama, is residing in Tibet. Their root monastery is in Tibet. So, and those people have a lot of influence on the layman. So these are the regions that we will have to look out for and see that the Chinese don't exploit that vulnerability as far as we are concerned. So we have issues and we are watching this very carefully.
You know, the Dalai Lama's reincarnation question is really about controlling the hearts and minds of the Tibetan people.
Yes, for us.
For us, it's going to be as important.
As important.
Right.
And seeing to it that the Chinese attempts to penetrate the Tibetan diaspora or split them don't succeed.
Right. And there's a huge Tibetan diaspora in India as well.
As well.
3 generations now, possibly on the 4th generation.
Yeah, but the numbers have dwindled. Many of them have gone abroad. But as I said, this lot, the Indo-Himalayan belt, they are still there.
Right. So, Mr. Ranade, now coming back to this triangle of India, the US, and China, you know, one of the Australian defense ministers was here in New Delhi about 15 years back, and he said something very interesting. Stephen Smith, guy from Perth. So he said that in the 21st century, only 3 relationships are going to matter. It's going to be between India, the US, and China. It's the India-China relationship, the US-China relationship that we are seeing, and of course the China-US relationship. How should India play its cards now, given the fact that 2 edges of that triangle are pretty much in conflict with each other? There's a tariff war on between them, and as you're saying, it could spill out into an all-out war. How does India play its cards in a situation like this to maximize our advantages, our benefits? How can we make the most of this situation for us?
Well, we'd of course have to try and take whatever advantage we can from wherever, but at the risk of limiting our options, let me say that the Chinese committed a strategic blunder. Xi Jinping committed a strategic blunder specifically when he launched the military operations against us in April 2020.
Why did he do that? It's been 5 years and we still don't have any clarity of why he launched 2 divisions there. There was absolutely no reason for him at that point.
Well, relations had deteriorated, and the Chinese at one stage wanted to arrest the deterioration. Therefore, they requested that let's have a meeting between the 2 leaders. We had Wuhan and we had Mamlapuram. Both didn't go well at all, but anyway. And if you remember, after Mamlapuram, Xi Jinping went to Nepal, and he made some very tough statements. So that signaled that it's not gone well. But what I heard is that the Chinese felt that we were getting, if I may say, too big for our boots. We were wanting a place at the high table. We wanted to join the nuclear suppliers group, things like that. Secondly, we were asking the Chinese for their assistance so that we could get in, and they didn't appreciate that. Third, they didn't appreciate the fact that our Prime Minister, every meeting, wanted the border to be settled. They thought, that's not something that you raise. They like to deify their own leader. So things like this. And they said, in fact, in 2017, that if you don't watch it, in as many words, mind you, and fairly rudely, we are going to teach you a lesson. And, well, the lesson was delivered. I think Doklam was not part of it, but certainly 2020. And personally, I don't think that's the end of it. We stopped them, so they were not able to achieve what their objective is. But what I read in the Chinese media or some of the articles that appear here and there is that they are continuing to upgrade the forces deployed in Tibet. And they are continuing to bring in new kind of weaponry and equipment into Tibet. So I don't think we've heard the end of it. Also, we have a common border with the Chinese, which is undemarcated. So it's a potential for dispute. So there is a limit to how much we can really befriend or cooperate with China unless we are willing to do it on the Chinese terms. And I don't see that happening. So that limits our scope. We can play for time. We can try and keep things cool till we build up ourselves. And I think there we need to focus a bit more on Atmanirbhar, etc., build up at least the vital sectors. But we are already trying to cooperate more closely with the West and with US. So I think that's the way that we'll have to go.
So there's been a thaw in the relationship of late between India and China. There have been some encouraging signals from the other side. There have been de-escalation along those two flashpoints. What's your reading of this? Why are the Chinese being so nice? Is it to buy time so they can look at Taiwan and the United States? They don't want a unsettled boundary with India, a hot boundary with India. Is that the game plan?
I think the reason is very clear, actually. The Chinese economy is in a very bad shape. And that is the reason why they decided that they will have some kind of a, I don't call it a thaw, I call it a slight pause, maybe. What they want is access to our market. We are the largest market in the world today, which is yet untapped. And the access to the European and US markets is being curbed. So they've already lost about 30% in exports, which is a huge blow to them. So they're very desperate looking for us. And they're trying to put a lot of pressure on us. And you as a journalist would know that they are trying to persuade journalists to write articles saying Indian industry needs them and all that.
Chinese investments.
Chinese investments. So they're trying to push that. Right. And that is a trap we should not fall into. But that is the reason why they're doing it. Right. And I think that is why they agreed to these flashpoints. But mind you, since we are on that particular topic, let me say, this congratulatory message from Xi Jinping to our president didn't mention a word about the border, didn't mention a word about friendship or what has happened in the past. It just advised us to look at things from a strategic height, etc. So certain things they're not going to touch on. And then on 8th and 9th of April, they had this conference on peripheral diplomacy or neighborhood diplomacy. Last one they had was in 2015. That was a conference which came out with tough recommendations. This time, they've spoken about being good to neighbors, etc. And they've referred to various countries. India is not mentioned.
Right. How interesting. And you have one neighbor of ours, this Bangladesh. It's emerged into some kind of a geopolitical headache of late. You had the chief advisor spending a lot of time in Beijing and literally offering Bangladesh's services to China. How do you see that playing out? The fact that you have smaller countries on our borders that have always tried to leverage, play one country against the other. Is China paying a lot of attention to Bangladesh of late? There's talk of a airfield as well being given to the Chinese in the north, very close to our chicken's neck.
Chinese have been trying to access our neighborhood for a long time. They've succeeded now in, Pakistan apart, succeeded in Nepal, in Sri Lanka, and now in Bangladesh. Bangladesh, this new grouping that has come, Yunus being the face and the Jamaat actually being behind him, it's not good for us. And I think the Chinese find that they can come in there and offer all kinds of things. I only hope that the Bangladesh Army Chief's visit to Russia and then the Russian ships coming there is a counter move. I don't know. I'm just hoping that it is. But that is something that I think we will need to look at very carefully, and I'm sure we are, because Bangladesh is too close for comfort. There are many things that can go wrong there. even without our intervention, and if that does, economically they're on the down, if that happens, then we'll have an influx of Bangladeshis coming into India, which will be another problem.
So the military says that you're looking at, earlier we were looking at a two-front problem with China and Pakistan, and now we have a three-front problem. Is that a realistic assessment, you think? Or is Bangladesh just a short-term headache, and once there are elections there, who knows, the tides might change over there?
See, I think, in my view, I would say it's a smaller problem, Bangladesh. To my mind, we can successfully intervene if we want to. And I don't see Chinese...
Militarily or economically or both?
Both. I don't see the Chinese shedding blood in Bangladesh or for Bangladesh. I don't see them pumping in huge amounts of money there. They'd want the Americans to do it, and I don't think the Americans are going to do it. So that's the situation there. On the three front, I don't know. I mean, China and Pakistan, I think we should look at as one front. It's basically the Western Theatre Command which is going to come into play. So, and that problem we're already facing. So I think there the Balochistan Liberation Army and all already doing something. Pakistan has got its internal problems there.
So this is this a deliberate policy? I mean, since we are on the topic of China's strategy, explain to our audience about how this strategy of encirclement of India, was that actually a very deliberate, well thought out of policy? Because one has heard about how the Chinese have not only armed the Pakistanis with nuclear weapons, but also tested the nuclear weapons for them. It's unprecedented in the history of nuclear arms relationships, where one country actually arms another. Were they actually working to a plan to ensure that, there is a school of thought which says that China wanted to firewall India into South Asia to ensure that we never came out and became a big challenger to them. Was there a big plan all along?
Well, I don't know about a plan on paper, but certainly they wanted to keep us inside South Asia. And as I told you, even 2020, they thought we were getting too big for our boots. We wanted to come onto the global high table. So it's part of the same thing. And as far as the arming of Pakistan is concerned, nuclear as well as missiles, it was the Americans connived at it. Right. The Americans knew that this is happening. We told them that this is happening, where the flights were. They didn't do anything. Right. Bangladesh also, there's a lot of suspicion that the Americans were involved in it.
The coup last year?
Yes, the coup last year. So I think at one level there is a kind of a connivance. And way back, in fact, when Kissinger and Nixon met Mao and Chou En-lai, there are those extracts there of their discussions.
1972?
Yeah, where I think Kissinger was talking to the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Wa, if I'm not mistaken. And there was some talk about nuclear weapons, etc. And Wang Wa sort of said, you don't mind if, we interact with Bangladesh? And Kissinger said, I don't mind even if you give them nuclear weapon. And Wang Wa wagged his finger and said, you're a naughty man. It's recorded. But it didn't happen at that time. Right. But a civilian nuclear agreement was signed between China and Bangladesh then.
Well, Sheikh Hasina was the
but
Prime
at
Minister.
that time. So, how these things translate into what happens later, one doesn't know. But there are these strands, if I may call it, that have been there. But I think there is an effort to see that we don't go beyond a point. Right. And I think we are equally determined that, we should realize our position.